You do not talk to that.
He paid cash, sir. Up front.
Cash does not make him a guest.
Table 11 is a guest. He is sitting at it.
Kitchen already dressed his plate. Run it!
I am not carrying that plate.
Babe, half the room is watching her.
Then let them watch. Apron off, sweetheart!
Yes, sir.
Her tips go in the house book, right?
Tips stay with the house. Policy.
May I clear his water first?
Check the podium.
Have you ever watched somebody get destroyed for doing the one decent thing in the room and had to just stand there? Tell me in the comments where you are watching from. And drop a like. Because in 14 days, that exact steak comes back through those doors in a sealed white box with a federal case number printed on the side. And Ferris Dabney has about 9 minutes left of the life he is enjoying right now. Let us rewind. Winona Hobart had worked at Brumfield Prime for 2 years and 4 months. And in all that time, she had never once been late. She lived in a one-bedroom above a tire shop on Delamere Street, in Kansas City, Missouri. And she paid for it with 2 jobs and a bus pass. Mornings she answered phones at a dental office. Evenings, 5 nights a week. She worked the dining room at the oldest steakhouse in the city. A room with brass sconces and 41 years of history and a wine list bound in leather. The steakhouse paid $2.13 an hour. Everything else came from strangers deciding what she was worth. Her mother, Idella Hobart, was 58 and lived in a care home out by the airport road. 14 months earlier, Idella had gone down in her own kitchen with a stroke that took the right side of her body and most of her words. She was still, even now, even in a vinyl recliner with her hair unbrushed. The most beautiful woman Winona had ever seen. People used to stop her in church. The care home cost $4,100 a month. Insurance covered a little under $3,000 of it. The rest was Winona. And the rest was why Winona worked doubles on holidays and walked to the bus stop in the dark and never, ever called in sick. Brumfield Prime belonged to Cordray Hospitality Group, 14 restaurants across 4 states. Run out of an office park in Overland Park by a man named Osgood Cordray, who had not eaten in one of his own dining rooms in 6 years. The general manager was Ferris Dabney. And Ferris Dabney ran that room the way a small country gets run by a man with a nice uniform. He had 3 habits, and every server could recite all 3. The first was the schedule. Anyone who questioned him lost hours. Not all of them. That would be obvious. Just enough. A woman named Trina asked about overtime in March and went from 5 shifts to 2. And by May, she had stopped coming in at all. And Dabney told corporate she was a no-call, no-show. The second was the linen fee. $11 off the top of every server's tips. Every shift. For aprons and towels. It appeared on nobody's pay stub. It went into a leather book behind the wait station. And once a week, Dabney carried the book into his office and came out without it. The third was the one nobody wrote down. In the kitchen. On the far side of the pass, there was a magnetic whiteboard where the sous chef marked allergies and 86s. In the bottom right corner of that board, in Dabney's handwriting, there was a 2-word phrase that had been there so long, the marker had ghosted into the surface. House cut. It meant a specific thing. It meant that a certain kind of guest was never to be refused service. The one who wandered in from the wrong side of the parking garage. The one who smelled like a shelter. The one who counted crumpled bills onto the tablecloth. Refusing service creates a scene, and a scene creates a review. Instead, they were to be served. Promptly. Politely. And what came out of that kitchen was not what came out for table 9. Vernita Womack, 41 years old. Black. 23 years in dining rooms. Had explained it to Winona on her 4th night. In the mop closet. In a whisper. They eat it and they leave. Vernita had said, they get sick in the parking lot instead of my section. That is the whole idea. Do not ask me again. Baby. And do not ever be the one holding the plate. Winona had asked what was in it. Vernita had looked at the door for a while before she answered. 9 months before that Friday in November, a man named Everton Crenshaw had come into Brumfield Prime on his 74th birthday, wearing a jacket he had owned since the Nixon administration. He was black. He was a retired city bus mechanic. He had saved for the ribeye because his late wife had eaten one there in 1981 and talked about it until the day she died. He ate half of it. He spent that night and the next day in an emergency room on Truman Road with cramping so severe the intake nurse wrote suspected obstruction on his chart. He called Cordray Hospitality Group 9 times. On the 9th call, a district manager named Dolores Mattingly took his statement, apologized warmly, and entered it into the system under a disposition code that read, guest declined further care. No further action required. Everton Crenshaw never got another call, and Ferris Dabney got a bonus that quarter for guest incident resolution. The man in the quilted coat came through the front door at 7:40 on a Friday night with a wait list 40 minutes deep. Cameron Stillwell saw him first, and her whole face went bright. Not disgusted, delighted. The way people get delighted when something is about to be funny. Sir, do you have a reservation? No. Ma'am, I can wait. Oh, you will not have to wait at all. She walked him past 11 parties who had been waiting since 7 and sat him at table 11. Dead center. In the sight line of the whole room. Then found Ferris Dabney and said 4 words into his ear. We have a house cut. In the kitchen, Barnard Coker, 52, sous chef, 16 years at that stove. Did what he had done maybe 30 times before and never once written down. He went to the walk-in and took out the ribeye that had come back from table 6 earlier that evening. Sent away for being overcooked. Already cut into. Already 20 minutes under a heat lamp. He dropped it on the floor. On purpose. Near the dish pit drain. And left it there while he built the plate. Then he picked it up. Ran it under the tap for 2 seconds. And put it back on the flat top to mark it again. Then Ferris Dabney came in through the swinging door with 2 paper packets in his hand. He had taken them out of the first aid drawer in the office stimulant laxative powder. The kind that comes in a box for adults. He emptied both of them into the small silver ramekin of pan sauce and stirred it with the handle end of a spoon. And he did it standing up straight in the middle of his own kitchen with 4 people watching. Because nobody there had ever once told him no. Dorsey Fitch, 24. Prep cook. 3 months on the job. Watched from the vegetable station with a knife in his hand and did not move. He would hate himself for that for a long time. Winona saw it through the pass window. Not all of it. Enough. She saw the packets, the spoon handle, and Dabney's face while he stirred. And then she walked to the wait station, took a blank check presenter card out of the drawer, and wrote 6 words on the back of it with a pen chained to the counter. Do not eat it. Please go. She folded it once. put it under her right palm, and carried it to table 11. Everything else happened the way the whole dining room saw it. At the end of it, she walked out into the cold in a white shirt, with no coat and no apron and no tips and no job. That was where the room thought the story stopped. It did not stop. Ferris Dabney crossed that dining room fast, reached down, and took the folded card right out of the old man's hand. He opened it. He read it. For 1 second, his mouth actually hung open. Then he laughed. He wadded the card into a ball in his fist, and he dropped it into the butter ramekin sitting next to the bread basket, into a 2-inch pool of softened butter. And he pressed it down with one finger the way you would put out a cigarette. "Enjoy your dinner," he said. "Compliments of the house." The old man looked at the butter dish for a moment. Then he said, "Could I trouble you for a box?" "Please." "For the steak?" The old man said, "I would hate to waste it." Cameron brought the box herself and set it down hard enough to rattle the salt shaker. The whole front of the house watched a homeless-looking man in a torn coat lift a 14-ounce ribeye into a paper container with his own hands. Tip the entire ramekin of pan sauce in after it. Close the lid. And press it flat. He counted out $112 in cash onto the tablecloth. He added 40 more. "That is for the young lady," he said. "She earned it." "She does not work here anymore," Cameron said, and she smiled. "No." The old man agreed. "I know." Then he reached into the butter dish with 2 fingers, picked the wadded card out of it, wiped it once on his sleeve, folded it into his palm, and stood up. Nobody stopped him. Nobody held the door. A room full of people in silk watched him walk out into the parking garage carrying a paper box. And every single one of them went back to their dinner. And Ferris Dabney straightened his cuffs and told the bartender to send table 9 around on him. The man in the quilted coat did not go to a shelter. He walked to the 3rd level of the garage, unlocked a gray sedan with a rental sticker in the window, set the paper box on the passenger seat like it was made of glass, and took out a phone. His name was Truman Yarborough. He was 67 years old, and he was worth a little over $6 billion. He had started with 1 refrigerated truck and a route through eastern Kansas. 40 years later, Yarborough Holdings owned distribution centers, cold chain logistics, 2 regional grocery chains, and, as of a signature 2 weeks out, 14 restaurants belonging to Cordray Hospitality Group, $410 million. The lawyers had been through the books twice. Everything was clean. Truman Yarborough had one rule about buying a business that fed people, and his board had stopped arguing years ago. Before he signed, he ate 1 meal, alone, unannounced, in the room he was buying, and when he did it, he wore his father's coat. Alvin Yarborough had washed dishes at a supper club in Topeka for 31 years. He wore a quilted work coat with a split elbow that he sewed shut himself with fishing line because he did not believe in buying a thing twice. He died at 59 on a Tuesday, standing up. In a kitchen, his son kept the coat. And once or twice a year, he put it on and found out how a room treats a man wearing it. Usually, a hostess found him a table. A server called him Sir. He left 300%. And he went home and signed the papers. That night, he sat in a rental car on the 3rd level of a parking garage with a paper box on the passenger seat. And his hands would not stop shaking. And it was not the cold. He called Bernadine Prosser at 9:40. She was 55, 19 years his general counsel, and she answered on the 2nd ring. Already awake. "Tell me," he told her. "All of it. The board in the kitchen." The word the hostess used at the door. The 2 paper packets, The young woman who wrote 6 words on a card and lost her job in front of 100 people for handing it to a stranger. Bernadine was quiet for a while. Truman, do not go back in there tonight. I was not planning to. I mean it. If you say your name in that room tonight, that whiteboard is blank by midnight. That steak is in a dumpster. And every one of them tells the same story about a confused old man who got upset. She exhaled. One night is a story. A pattern is a case. Which one do you want? How do I get a pattern? You go back. Not as you. As him. Pause. And you do not touch that box again. Where is it? Passenger seat. Good. It does not move until somebody with a chain of custody form moves it. At 11:12, he made one more call. To Dr. Winona Burkhalter, director of an independent forensic laboratory in Lenexa, who had been asleep for an hour and did not complain about it. I need a courier at a hotel in Kansas City at 7 in the morning, he said. 1 food sample. Sealed. Photographed. Logged. And tested for anything that should not be in a pan sauce. I want the custody documented from the second it left the building. And nobody at Cordray Hospitality. Nobody at my own company below Bernadine Prosser learns this sample exists. Understood. Sir, Dr. Burkhalter said, consider it done. 2 miles east. Winona Hobart got off a bus and walked the last 4 blocks in a white shirt with her arms crossed over her chest. And by the time she got her key in the door, her teeth were chattering too hard to answer her own phone. It was the care home. Idela's account was 31 days past due. At 60 days. They were required to tell her. They would need to discuss transfer options. Winona said she understood. She said she would take care of it. Then she sat down on the floor of her kitchen in her white shirt, with her back against the cabinet, and stayed there until the sun came up. The courier came at 7 in the morning. The box went into an evidence bag. The bag went into a cooler. The cooler went into a van, and a man in a polo shirt wrote the time on a form and asked Truman Yarborough to initial it. Yarborough initialed it with a hand that was steadier than it had been the night before. Then he put the coat back on. He went back on Saturday. He walked through the same doors at 8 o'clock. And Cameron Stillwell looked up from the reservation screen, and her face did the exact same thing it had done the night before. Bright. Delighted. She did not recognize him as a returning guest, because she had never once looked at his face. Sir, do you have a reservation? No. Ma'am, you will not have to wait at all. Table 11. Same chair. He watched her walk to the pass window and say the 2 words. And he watched a 52-year-old sous chef nod without looking up. And something in Truman Yarborough went very cold and very quiet. It was not a mistake. It was not one bad night. It was a procedure. It had a name and a station and a nod. He ordered the ribeye again. He asked for a box again. Ferris Dabney came by the table on his way to the bar and said, without stopping, "Not going to open the doggy bag this time." Chief 2 servers laughed because they were supposed to. One of them, a woman in her 40s with 23 years in dining rooms, did not. She stood at the wait station with her hands flat on the wood and stared at the middle distance while it happened. Yarborough left $112 and a $40 tip and walked out with a second paper box. Sunday, he drove to Lee's Summit and sat in a Cordray steakhouse in the same coat. The manager there, a woman named Ruth Ann, took one look at him, seated him in a booth by the fireplace, brought him coffee before he asked, and comped his dessert. She never stopped calling him sir. He tipped her $200 and sat in the car afterward with his eyes closed for a while. Because that was the whole answer. Right there. In one booth. It was not the company. It was not the coat. It was the man. Monday, he ate at the Cordray location in Independence. The bartender there said the phrase out loud to a line cook, while Truman Yarborough was standing 6 feet away with a menu in his hands. House cut. That was the moment the thing stopped being about Ferris Dabney. By Tuesday, Bernadine Prosser had a team of 4 working out of a suite at a hotel downtown with the curtains closed. And every day the pile got worse. The point of sale data came first, because the acquisition agreement already gave them the right to it. Over 19 months, 141 tickets at Brumfield Prime had been rung in, closed out, and comped under a code called Employee Meal. Kitchen. All 141 had been opened at either Table 11 or Table 12. All of them were single guest checks. All of them were entered under Ferris Dabney's manager number. 141 people. The scheduling software came next. 12 employees over 2 years had raised a question in writing. In the app. About wages or hours or the linen fee. 11 of the 12 had lost between 40 and 60% of their shifts within 3 weeks of asking. The 12th had been fired outright. Then, the guest incident reports. 9 in 2 years from Brumfield Prime involving gastrointestinal complaints. All 9 closed by the same district manager, Dolores Mattingly. Under the same disposition code, guest declined further care. No further action required. One of the 9 had a name Bernadine circled twice, Everton Crenshaw, 74, who had spent a birthday in an emergency room on Truman Road. And on Wednesday, Dorsey Fitch quit. He was 24. He lasted 4 days after the Friday. On the 5th morning, he called the Cordray Hospitality Ethics Hotline. The number printed on the poster in the break room. And he spoke for 11 minutes into a recording and gave his name and said the words laxative and pan sauce, and on purpose. The hotline routed complaints from the Kansas City region to a district manager for initial review. Dolores Mattingly listened to 11 minutes of a young man's voice shaking. She closed the file that afternoon under a code that meant employee dispute, not substantiated. Then she sent Ferris Dabney a text message that said, word for word, "Your prep kid is a problem. Handle it before he calls somebody who is not me." Dorsey Fitch never got a call back. He assumed nobody cared. He took a job at a car wash and did not sleep well. Winona Hobart, that same week, applied to 11 restaurants. She got 2 interviews. The second one went so well that the woman across the table said, "We would love to have you," and reached for her phone to make one courtesy call. And Winona sat there in her only blazer and watched the woman's face change while she listened. Ferris Dabney had told her that Winona Hobart was let go for theft from the tip book. The woman apologized. She said she was sure it was a misunderstanding. She said they had filled the position. On Thursday, Winona went back to Brumfield Prime to collect her final check and the coat out of her locker. Dabney made her stand at the hostess stand for 90 minutes while he did a wine inventory. When he finally came out, he handed her an envelope and watched her open it. Gross pay, $41.60. Mines linen fee, $11. Minus register shortage, $30.60. You can cash that anywhere, he said. Congratulations. Cameron Stillwell was standing behind him with her arms folded. And she said, "Your locker got cleaned out Monday. Everything went to donation." Winona did not say anything. She put the envelope in her purse. And she walked out through the same doors. And she made it all the way to the bus shelter before her legs stopped working and she sat down hard on the metal bench. Vernita Womack came out 4 minutes later in her apron, in the cold, with her phone in her hand. "Baby, listen to me. Do not go far. Vernita, I have got nothing left to go far with." "I know." Vernita looked back at the building once. "But something is happening in there. That old man came back Saturday. He came back and sat in the same chair and let them do it again. And he did not touch the food. And he took it with him. Twice. She pressed her lips together. Winona. Nobody does that. He is a hungry man in a torn coat. Maybe. Vernita put a folded $20 bill in Winona's hand and closed her fingers over it before she could refuse. Or maybe you are the only person in that whole room he actually saw. That Sunday, she took 2 buses out to the airport road and sat with her mother for 3 hours. Idella Hobart could not say much anymore, but she could still read a face. And she had been reading this particular face since it was 4 days old. Winona told her the job was fine. She told her the section was busy. She told her the tips were good. And she smiled the whole time. At some point, her mother's left hand came across the arm of the recliner and closed around her daughter's wrist and would not let go. Neither of them said anything else for a long while. On the bus, back downtown, Winona did the arithmetic again. 29 days. She did not believe Vernita. She had spent her whole life around people who told her that something was happening. And mostly what happened was nothing. But that night, in the hotel suite downtown, Bernadine Prosser found the thing that made her stand up out of her chair. 2 years earlier, Cordray Hospitality had installed a single security camera at Brumfield Prime after a run of missing meat from the walk-in. It was mounted above the dish pit, aimed down at the drain in the back of the flat top. It had been recording continuously ever since. Nobody had looked at it in 22 months. The staff had forgotten it existed. And Ferris Dabney. In 19 months of stirring paper packets into ramekins, had never once stood anywhere else. The recorder was a local box, in a locked cabinet, in Dabney's office, and it wrote over itself every 30 days. They had 21 days left of that Friday night, and no way to reach into that office without Ferris Dabney knowing about it by lunch. The laboratory report landed in Bernadine Prosser's inbox on the 8th day at 6 in the morning, and it was 11 pages long. And page 4 was the one that ended Ferris Dabney's life as he understood it. The pan sauce contained bisacodyl, a stimulant laxatif, at a concentration equivalent to roughly 8 adult doses in a single serving of sauce. The report noted, in the flat language those reports use, that ingestion at that level in a person of advanced age or with cardiac or renal impairment could produce severe dehydration. The word the doctor used, twice, was hospitalization. The meat itself carried a bacterial profile consistent with contact with a floor drain surface. Both samples matched. Chemically, across 2 boxes taken on 2 different nights. 8 days apart. By a customer who had never given his name. Bernadine Prosser read it twice, and then called Truman Yarborough at 6:20. Truman, this is not a personnel matter anymore. I know. I want to be very clear about what I am about to do. Because once I do it, neither of us controls it. She waited. Adulterating a food product with a drug, with reckless disregard for the risk of serious bodily injury, is a federal crime. There is an entire statute for it. If I pick up this phone, it stops being your company's problem and becomes the government's case. Make the call, Yarborough said. And Bernadine, do not let anybody soften it for me later. Special Agent Lucius Threadgill of the Food and Drug Administration Office of Criminal Investigations had worked adulteration cases for 16 years. And most of them were sad and small. He drove to the hotel suite on the 9th day, expecting a disgruntled buyer with a theory. He left 4 hours later with a banker's box. What got him was not the lab report. It was the reservation software. Because Cameron Stillwell had been writing it down. Every walk-in guest at Brumfield Prime got entered into the booking system, with a seat time and a note. And in the notes field, over 19 months. In her own login, 138 times. Cameron had typed 2 letters, HC, sometimes with commentary, sometimes with a smiling face. On the 10th of February, at 7:52 in the evening, next to a guest count of 1, the note read HC. Bidet. He will be a while. That was Everton Crenshaw, 74 years old. Ribea. Emergency room on Truman Road. They typed it. Threadgill said, out loud, to nobody, in a hotel suite with the curtains closed. They typed it into the computer next to the man's birthday. The rest came fast. Because it always does, once one wall goes. The point of sale tickets. The schedule software. 9 incident reports closed by a district manager under a code that meant nothing happened. Dorsey Fitch's 11-minute call to an ethics hotline. Still sitting on a server. Marked not substantiated. And 1 text message from Dolores Mattingly to Ferris Dabney sent 40 minutes after that call, which Threadgill printed out and put on top of the pile because he wanted the magistrate to read it first. Your prep kid is a problem. Handle it before he calls somebody who is not me. The recorder kept 30 days on its main drive and wrote a weekly archive to a second disk. Nobody at Brumfield Prime had ever configured to purge, because nobody there knew it existed. On the 13th day, a federal magistrate signed a warrant. It authorized agents to seize the digital video recorder in the locked cabinet in the general manager's office at Brumfield Prime, the whiteboard on the kitchen wall, the first aid drawer in the office, and the personal phones of Ferris Dabney, Cameron Stillwell, Barnard Coker, and Dolores Mattingly. The main drive had 16 days of that Friday night left on it. Threadgill wanted to execute at 6 in the morning, with the lights off and the doors locked. The way you do it when you are being careful. Truman Yarborough asked for 1 change. 1. He asked for it in a conference room with his own lawyer telling him no. Do it at dinner service. He said, Friday, 7:40. Why? Threadgill said, because on the 10th of February, at 7:52 in the evening, a room full of people sat in their chairs and watched a 74-year-old man eat, and not one of them stood up. Yarborough put his hands flat on the table. I am not asking you to arrest anybody for an audience. I am asking you not to do it in the dark. That room helped. That room should have to look at it. Threadgill looked at him for a long moment. Then he said, 7:40. The deal closed at 4 o'clock that Friday afternoon in a conference room in Overland Park. Bernadine Prosser had spent 9 days trying to talk her client out of it. Walk away, she said. Undisclosed criminal exposure. Material misrepresentation. Tear it up and let the lawyers fight about the deposit. If I walk away, Truman Yarborough said, Osgood Cordray sells to somebody else by spring, and Ferris Dabney still has keys. So they closed. Yarborough Holdings paid $391 million, $19 million below the agreed price. The reduction taken for undisclosed liabilities described in 1 sentence so bland that Osgood Cordray signed it in under a minute. He was relieved. He thought he had gotten out ahead of something. He just did not know what. At 4:11, Truman Yarborough became the owner of 14 restaurants, 190 employees, and a whiteboard with 2 words ghosted into the corner. At 7:40 that evening, the front door opened, and a man in a gray wool cap and a mud-colored quilted coat with a split elbow walked in out of the cold. The room was full. 42 covers. Brass sconce. A wait list at the door. Cameron Stillwell looked up from the reservation screen, and her face went bright. Sir, do you have a reservation? No. Ma'am, you will not have to wait at all. Table 11. Same chair? He sat down and put his hands on the white linen. And across the dining room, Ferris Dabney saw the coat and started over with his cuffs in his fingers and a smile already loading. Back again. Chief, you know we do not run a soup kitchen. I know what you run. Dabney laughed and looked around to see who was watching. He was mid-sentence about the doggy bag when the front doors opened again behind him and kept opening. Bernadine Prosser came in first. Charcoal suit. No quat. Walking like a woman who had read the ending. Behind her came Special Agent Lucius Threadgill of the Food and Drug Administration Office of Criminal Investigations with a folded warrant in his left hand. Behind him came 6 more agents in navy windbreakers with yellow letters across the back. 2 peeled off toward the kitchen doors and 2 toward the office hallway. Nobody in that dining room made a sound. Threadgill held up the warrant. Ferris Dabney. Federal search warrant for these premises. Step away from the table. Sir. Dabney's eyes went. On instinct. To the hostess stand. To Cameron, who had gone the color of the tablecloth. There is a mistake. Dabney said, I am the general manager here. Who is your contact at Cordray Hospitality? I will call them right now. There is no Cordray Hospitality. Bernadine Prosser said, as of 4:11 this afternoon. And then she walked past him to table 11, stopped beside the man in the torn coat, and said, in a room where you could now hear the ice machine in the bar. Mr. Yarborough, are you all right to continue? Ferris Dabney turned around very slowly. The old man took off the gray wool cap. My name is Truman Yarborough, he said. I bought this company at 4 o'clock. I have eaten in this dining room twice. Both times your kitchen served me a steak off the floor and a sauce with 8 doses of laxative stirred into it. And both times I carried it out of here in a box. He nodded at Threadgill, and an agent set a white evidence box on the corner of the tablecloth. Sealed, signed across the seam, a federal case number printed along the side. That is the first one, Yarborough said. Near the banquette, a man said, "Oh my God," into his hands. Dabney's face had stopped working. He was still holding his own cuff between 2 fingers. Frozen there. And the lacquered blonde hair had come loose in one strand across his forehead. You cannot, he started. You were that coat. My father wore this coat for 31 years washing dishes in Topeka, Yarborough said. I put it on so I would find out what kind of room I was buying. He looked past Dabney, at the faces turned toward him. I found out. 2 weeks ago, every one of you watched a young woman lose her job at that hostess, stand for warning a stranger. Nobody stood up. She walked out into the cold in a white shirt. Then, Threadgill took a clear plastic sleeve out of a folder. Inside, it was a small card. Wrinkled into a ball once and smoothed flat again. Stained yellow at one corner where the butter had soaked through. He handed it to Yarborough, who held it up so the room could see, and read the 6 words out loud. Do not eat it. Please go. Nobody moved. That card is government evidence now, he said. It has a number on it. The young woman who wrote it made $2.13 an hour. And she knew exactly what it would cost her. And she wrote it anyway. At 7:49, Special Agent Lucius Threadgill placed Ferris Dabney under arrest on a federal complaint. 9 minutes. Door to door. Dabney's hands came up automatically to fix his cuffs. And the agent told him to keep them where they were. So he walked the entire length of his own dining room with one shirt cuff hanging open and flapping against his wrist. Past 42. Covers of people who had eaten his food and laughed at his jokes and would not raise their eyes off their own plates. He stopped once. Next to table 11, tell them I never touched her, he said. But Winona Hobart was not listening to him. She had come in 90 seconds earlier with Vernita Womack's hand on her back, and she was standing at the end of the wait station in her only blazer, folding a napkin she had picked up off the tray without thinking, the way you do after 2 years. She did not look up until he was past. The digital video recorder came out of the locked cabinet in the manager's office at 8:15 that night. With 16 days of that Friday still on the main drive and 22 months sitting on an archive disk, nobody remembered. It took 2 analysts 9 days to go through it. A camera aimed at a floor drain, and a man who never once considered that the ugliest thing he did might be inside the frame. 61 separate incidents. 61 plates dropped deliberately on the tile. Picked up, rinsed, and marked again. In 34 of them, Ferris Dabney walks into the shot from the left holding paper packets, tears them open over a silver ramekin, stirs with the handle end of a spoon, and walks out. In one of them, the one the prosecutors would eventually play last, he does it, then leans back into frame, checks his own reflection in the stainless steel of the hood, and fixes his hair. Cameron Stillwell flipped 11 days before he did. She came in with a lawyer her parents paid for and gave a proffer that ran 40 pages. And the parts read out loud in open court did more damage than the video. He picked them at the door. She said, before they ever sat down, she said he told me the notes field was not real, that it was just for us, that nobody at corporate ever reads it. She said, I asked him once if somebody could get really sick. He said that was the point. They do not come back, she said, on page 31. And this is the line that made a juror put her hand over her mouth. I typed the letters. I know I typed the letters. But I did not think of them as people. They were walk-ins. Ferris Dabney was indicted on 4 counts of tampering with a consumer product with reckless disregard for the risk of serious bodily injury, plus conspiracy. Barnard Coker took a plea and testified. Cameron Stillwell pleaded to a single conspiracy count and lost her cosmetology license, her wedding, and her name in every restaurant group in 3 states. Dolores Mattingly was charged with making false statements to federal investigators about 9 incident reports and 1 ethics hotline call. Osgood Cordray was not charged. He spent 11 hours in a deposition explaining why the man who buried complaints reported to nobody. And the transcript is now used as a teaching document in a hospitality management program at a state university, which is its own kind of sentence. The engagement ring came up at the restitution hearing. Cameron had told everyone it cost $8,900. It had been bought. The records showed, with cash. Ferris Dabney kept in a leather book behind a wait station, $11 a shift from every server for aprons and towels. And whatever else he decided to take, the court ordered it surrendered toward restitution. It was appraised, sold, and entered in the ledger at $406. $406 went out as a restitution disbursement that spring. It was applied to an outstanding balance at a care home out by the airport road, on the account of Idella Hobart, who could not read the letter that came with it, and who cried anyway when her daughter read it to her. Truman Yarbrough did not wait for any of that. 9 days after the arrest, he stood in the Brumfield Prime kitchen at 10 in the morning with all 14 general managers of his new restaurant group in the room, because he had made them drive in. Behind him, on a screen, was a photograph of the whiteboard with the 2 ghosted words circled in red. Somebody in this room already knows what that means, he said. I am not asking who. I am telling you what happens now. What happened now was 4 things, and he wrote them on the wall in permanent marker while they watched. The first was Rule 1. At the expediting station of every kitchen he owned, screwed into the metal at eye level where the tickets hang, there is now a laminated card. On it, in 6 words, is a photograph of a wrinkled check presenter card with a yellow butter stain across the corner. Do not eat it. Please go. Underneath it, 1 sentence. Anyone in this building may stop any plate for any reason, and no one may ask them why. The second was the hotline. The old one routed to district managers. The new one routes to an outside firm and to Bernadine Prosser's desk. And every call gets a case number that the caller keeps. And a written answer in 10 days. Dorsey Fitch got a call 4 months later from an investigator, apologizing for a recording nobody had listened to. He was working at a car wash. He is now a sous chef. The third was the money. The $19 million that came off the purchase price went into a fund. Restitution to every guest they could identify from 141 comped tickets, which took a year, and found 93 of them. Back pay with interest to the 12 employees whose hours had been cut for asking a question in writing, including a woman named Trina who got a check for $11,000 and had to sit down in a parking lot. The fourth was the job. Bernadine Prosser called Winona Hobart on a Tuesday and asked her to come downtown. And Winona put on the blazer again and sat in a conference room on the 19th floor, waiting to be told she could have her old section back. "We are creating a position," Bernadine said. "Guest standards officer. 14 rooms. You would have the authority to stop service in any of them. On the spot. And nobody in this company, including Mr. Yarborough, can override you in the moment. You would report to me. $94,000. Benefits from the first day. And your mother's care home moves to the facility on Ward Parkway if you want it." Winona did not say yes for almost a full minute. "I did not go to college," she said finally. "I have read the file on 19 managers who did." Bernadine said, "You are the only person in this entire company who ever stopped a plate." Winona looked at the table for a while. "I want Vernita Womack in the room when I write the standard," she said. "She has been carrying it for 23 years. She should get to put her name on it." 3 months later, the corner of the kitchen wall at Brumfield Prime was repainted twice. Because the first coat did not cover the ghost of the marker, and Winona Hobart made them do it over. The whiteboard itself was in a federal evidence facility in a numbered bag. In its place, there is a printed schedule. And at the pass, a laminated card with 6 words and a butter stain in the photograph. Vernita Womack was made floor manager in February, 23 years after she started clearing plates. Her name is on page 1 of the Standard, next to Winona's. And she keeps a copy in her purse, the way other people keep pictures. Dorsey Fitch came back in March. The first day, he stood at the dish pit for a minute, looking at the drain. And Winona let him stand there. "I saw it, and I did not do anything," he said. "You called the hotline. 4 days late. You were 24 and you needed the job." She handed him a clean towel. 4 days late still counts. Dorsey. Nobody else in that building called at all. On the second Saturday in April, table 11 was set for 1 at 7:30, and every server on the floor knew whose it was. The kitchen had been arguing about the ribeye since 2 o'clock. Everton Crenshaw came in wearing the same jacket he had owned since the Nixon administration, because it was the good one. He was 75 now. He had told the woman on the phone that he did not want any fuss and nothing free. And when Winona met him at the door, he was holding his wallet like a man expecting to have to prove something. "Mr. Crenshaw, I am Winona. I know who you are." He looked at the dining room over her shoulder. The brass. The linen. The wait list at the door. Last time I sat in there, I could hear them laughing at the bar. "I know. My wife ate here in 1981. He said it the way you set something down carefully. She talked about it for 40 years. Winona took his coat herself and hung it on the hook by the podium instead of the closet, so he could see it the whole time. Mr. Crenshaw, I am going to carry your plate from the past to this table with my own two hands. And I am not putting it down anywhere in between, she said. And if you want, you can come stand at that window and watch them cook it. He came and stood at the window. The whole line stopped and shook his hand, one after another. In their whites with tickets hanging, Barnard Coker was not there anymore. The man on the flat top was a 30-year-old named Ruiz, who cooked that ribeye like it was the last one on earth. And when it was ready, he carried it to the window himself and set it in Winona's hands. Everton Crenshaw ate every bite of it. Halfway through, he put his fork down and pressed the heels of both hands against his eyes. And Winona stood 4 feet away with a water pitcher and said nothing and did not go get anybody, because he had asked for no fuss. Then he picked up the fork and finished. He tried to pay. They would not let him. He put $60 into the tip jar anyway and told the hostess it was for the line, then stood in the doorway with his coat over his arm and looked back at the room one more time. "Tell that old fella in the coat something for me," he said. "Tell him my wife would have liked how it turned out. Truman Yarborough still eats there about once a month, still in his father's coat. The staff know him now and call him Sir. And what he likes is that they call the next man in a torn coat Sir, too. He has watched them do it when he was not the one at the table." Idella Hobart moved to the facility on Ward Parkway in January, where the therapy is 4 days a week instead of 1. In May, on a Tuesday, with no warning at all, she looked at her daughter and said her name, just the one word. It took her a while to get it out. Winona did not tell anybody for 2 days. She just carried it around. The original card came back 11 months later, after the plea, in a sealed envelope with a chain of custody forms stapled to it, wrinkled where a fist had closed on it, yellow at one corner where the butter had dried. A lawyer on Bernadine's team offered to have it restored and mounted. They could lift the stain. Winona said no. She keeps it folded in the inside pocket of the blazer she wore to the interview. She puts it on the table before every standards meeting she runs. And she has never once had to explain to a room what it is. Ferris Dabney pleaded guilty on a Thursday morning in a federal courtroom with 11 of his former employees in the gallery, and was sentenced to 7 years and 3 months, a $200,000 fine, and a lifetime bar from any job in food service in the United States. At allocution, he said he never intended for anyone to be hurt. The judge asked what he thought 8 doses of a laxative was intended to do. He did not have an answer. Cameron Stillwell got 3 years of probation and a restitution order she will be paying until she is 46. Dolores Mattingly got 18 months. Barnard Coker cooked his last meal for money at 52. Winona Hobart is 27 now. She stops about 1 plate a month, in 14 dining rooms across 4 states, and has never once been asked why. The last thing worth telling is small. There is a laminated card above every expediting station Truman Yarborough owns. On it is a photograph of 6 words written in ballpoint by a 26-year-old who had $190 in her tip book. A care home invoice 31 days past due. And everything in the world to lose. She wrote it anyway, in under 4 seconds. Standing up. That is the whole thing. That is all it ever was. Somebody in a torn coat is going to walk into a room you are sitting in this year. You will not know who he is. That is not the test. The test is whether you would say something if you knew he was nobody at all.